May 25th, the death of George Floyd sparks outcry across the country. 4 days later, protests begin outside the Allen County Courthouse.
But when the streets are cleared and the public cries for justice pause, protesters and police officers return back home to their lives where the fight for change continues. So why now? Why here? And who is leading the way? Well, to bring change takes leaders, extraordinary people who inspire communities forward.
It's their stories of everyday courage and love that we want to share with you tonight. Fort Wayne's NBC News is focused on the fort to celebrate its faces of change.
Good evening, I'm Linda Jackson.
And I'm Tom Powell. Over the next half hour, you'll meet 7 people who were part of the crowd here in front of the Allen County Courthouse.
From police officers to a protest organizer to a photographer whose photograph actually showed up in Time magazine. We wanted to know more about why they were here.
And Linda will begin with a pastor who I spoke with the night of the unrest.
With tear gas still in the air and police on loudspeakers urging protesters to go home, he brought the church here to this corner outside the courthouse. I caught back up with Pastor Raymond Dix of the 101-year-old Pilgrim Baptist Church in the fort, who is now shepherding his church community during a pandemic.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Typically, these sounds
Hallelujah.
would come from this sanctuary every Sunday morning at Pilgrim Baptist Church. But because of COVID-19, Sundays these days are usually virtual, anything but typical. And once a month, the sounds have come from a parking lot.
We may not be in the building, but the church is in the world. The church is in the streets. The church is right here on today. Give God some praise for that.
Pastor Raymond Dix and his wife Sonia have been with Pilgrim Baptist Church in the fort for about 3 years. He grew up in East Chicago, wanting to become a civil engineer and build bridges. Now, he's helping build relationships with God.
When I turned 15, at that point in time, I just really felt God's calling on my life, and I kind of fought it as much as I could. But when I was 16 years old, I preached my first sermon.
That first sermon, Galatians chapter 6.
Be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatever a man soweth, that also shall he reap. And so the subject was, you reap what you sow.
Pastor Dix has led churches since he was 25. He says he learned pastoral ministry from men in the church who came before him.
They may not have been the world's greatest preachers, but they knew how to shepherd people.
That shepherding put to the test May 29th in downtown Fort Wayne, the first night of the protests.
Maybe 8 o'clock, one of my pastor friends, Pastor Williamson, called me and said, hey, they're firing tear gas in downtown Fort Wayne. I'm discouraged, I'm hurt, I'm angry, but at the same time, I'm hopeful.
My co-anchor Tom Powell talked with him.
After we get past the pain, we have to stand in hope.
Amen.
I intentionally went to some of the young African American people who were there and said, hey, let me pray with you. Let me talk with you. I want you to live. I want you to survive. I want you to thrive. And I also want you to go home. Know that your best protest is to graduate high school, to go to college, become a judge, become a prosecutor, serve your community in such a way that you can bring a fresh perspective.
He shepherded a flock that night, just as he does every Sunday.
Dance before the Lord. Come on and dance.
Pastor Dix said his heart broke for our community that night, but he said, too, he's proud to see the progress since and hopes for more communication, especially between police and citizens.
The protests here brought up feelings of the civil rights era. One of the most well-known photographers of that time, Gordon Parks, once said this. He said he could have just as easily picked up a knife or a gun. Instead, his choice of weapon against racism was a camera. Following in his footsteps now, another face of change.
They're drawn up wide above high. We smile and look at you because we know time is now.
You're listening to the track Vintage Future by Fort Wayne artist and photographer DJ Eclipse as he captures moments of the present.
We don't see enough of documented Fort Wayne in photography, especially in the black community. We just don't really see a lot of it. So that was kind of the thing that kind of burned in me to want to do it.
That fire drives his patience. He waits, watches, and listens. He takes inspiration from civil rights photographer Gordon Parks.
And he showed, the perspective of race, from a photographer's point of view, and it was just really immersive material.
Parks shot a photo essay for Life magazine in 1956. As this article in the Huffington Post points out, at first the rosy images appear idyllic, but take a closer look and they tell the full story. Parks once said, "The subject matter is so much more important than the photographer," a sentiment picked up by those who studied his work.
I've tried to take the me out of it because I really like to focus and keep the focus on the why people are here.
So when DJ Eclipse talks about the national recognition his Fort Wayne photos are receiving, naturally, his focus is selfless.
When Time magazine put the picture out of the kid with the bullhorn, I was like, one day he's going to be able to show this to his kids and his grandkids and say, hey, I was there. That's going to be a timeless moment for him. And I was really thankful that it happened.
This is the church. This is the people. And the time is now.
He told Time many of the protesters feel unheard, and he hopes these images will speak for them. So far, it's working.
I'm really glad that it's inspired the city of Fort Wayne a lot. Like, I've gotten a lot of messages from people in Fort Wayne just saying that they've been inspired by it, or they've been moved by it, or this, made them want to donate to organizations. It's made them want to go out and protest. It's made them, have some conversations they weren't comfortable with having. Like, if a photo can make you do that, then I kind of feel like I did my job.
A lot of people get no.
Time magazine certainly felt he did his job well. In fact, they featured one of his photographs of a child here at the protests in a special edition.
It's a photograph of Walter Lewis Jr. speaking 1,000 words to all the people across the country who saw it. Here's reporter Amelia Miles.
Mason up! It's babies out here! It's kids out here!
Walter Lewis, a father fighting for change.
I hope that we can get an understanding out of this whole thing, that they have a better future. They don't have to worry about being signaled out because of the color of their skin or where they come from.
At first, Lewis didn't head down to the protest, but after he saw posts showing up on social media, he says he felt he needed to be there.
And I was actually having a seafood boil here at the house, and I told my wife, well, let me go down there and show my support. So I was like, hey, let me stop down there 15, 20 minutes and I'm back. Well, when I get down there, I'm the only one with a bullhorn. This is actually a Zach bullhorn right here.
For $20, this bullhorn turned Walter into a leader for the protesters.
Getting down there and really realizing the power of it, and then realizing that the people just want somebody to be on their side and to lead them, to understand them. And that's what been my journey this whole time.
When he got home, his son, Walter Lewis Jr., wanted to know what was going on.
He was like, well, Dad, what happened? And I was telling him a little bit about the history and telling him a little bit about what's going on. And before you know it, he was intrigued by it, and he has been ever since then. So I was like, okay, well, let me take you down there so you can see.
That decision landed his son in the spotlight, his picture making it all the way to Time magazine.
I want to say maybe 3 weeks ago, when I actually got the actual Time magazine, I was really reading it for the first time, and I realized, like, whoa, he's the centerfold for Fort Wayne.
And as for what he wants to see moving forward.
Personally, I want accountability.
I'm standing for my people!
That's the whole thing we've been talking about from this whole time, and every other march we've done and stuff like that. It's about accountability.
Amelia Miles, Fort Wayne's NBC.
The first night of the protest was tense with tear gas and anger. A week later, this was the scene downtown. Politicians and police joined protesters arm in arm for a unity march across the Martin Luther King Jr. Bridge.
But did the walk fulfill its intended purpose of unity? Julian Tikaram catches up with one of the officers who met with protesters to talk about what it's like right now to wear the badge.
Fort Wayne Police Sergeant Sophia Rosalie Scottina has been on the force for more than 20 years.
Can you run a 10-28-29, please?
After she graduated from the academy, she started on patrol.
You know, you go into those runs day in and day out, and it's never good situations. It's people abusing each other. It's people robbing. It's people shooting. And I never really understood that it was so negative all the time.
She says being an officer is hard, but it gets even more complicated when you're a female Hispanic officer.
I've had comments made to me by the public, but it's come from everyone. I'm not Mexican enough, or I'm not Hispanic enough, I'm not minority enough because I'm an officer.
She says male chauvinism is alive and well in the profession.
It's not because I'm Hispanic, maybe because I'm a woman. A lot of the old school mentality of women don't belong in policing.
How do you deal with that?
I do a good job. That's how I deal with that.
She's dealt with personal tragedy, losing her husband, a former police officer, to a heart attack.
It was devastating.
Devastating not only for her, but for the 2 kids they had just adopted.
You know, trying to break that news to him the morning it happened was really hard. And for me, I know I'm suffering for his loss, but theirs is even greater because they were about to get the dad of their dreams, right? In case you wanted to quit today, don't. You're needed.
Children are a big source of comfort for Rosalie Scottina. She received these notes from middle school students when the George Floyd protests were happening.
Those things in Minnesota didn't happen here. I'm not going to say we don't have issues here, but we didn't have that. We've never had that. We've never had an in-custody death like that.
As the protests went on, police and demonstrators eventually talked. Rosalie Scottina spoke with this young lady about police using tear gas. She says even though the protester didn't agree with her, they both understood each other a little more.
We've got a lot of things to manage, and we try to do it the best we can.
Now you're hearing more and more about, what Black parents tell their young kids about how to deal with the police. And there's a lot of fear there. I mean, how does it make you feel that somebody would see you and your badge and be afraid for their life?
It saddens me, really, because everyone likes to be thought of as an individual. I might wear the uniform, but I am still who I am. I know what I am and what I believe, and that's just, it's the reverse of what you're just reversing what you don't want me to do to you. So because one Black person kills another Black person, am I supposed to think all Black people are bad? No, that'd be awful. I don't think that. So I wish if one officer makes or does something that someone doesn't like, does something awful like they did in Minnesota, I don't want you to judge me by what they do. I want you to judge me by what I do.
She says the police badge gives officers authority, but their actions will be what gain them respect. For Fort Wayne's NBC News, I'm Julian Tikaram.
The official word from police is that they responded appropriately during the first weekend of protests. The ACLU of Indiana, though, claims otherwise, filing a lawsuit against the city of Fort Wayne and the Allen County Sheriff's Department claiming excessive force. Sheriff David Gladio maintains that any use of force was made in response to, quote, unlawful conduct. The city has yet to officially file a response.
So let's take you back to that first night where law enforcement officers arrested more than 100 protesters. We were there when law enforcement first arrived at the scene. A planned peaceful protest turned ugly.
It's not just for George, this is for all.
People are throwing water bottles at the police officers. Members of our crew out here talking to different people about why they're here tonight.
I'm discouraged, I'm hurt, I'm angry. But at the same time, I'm hopeful.
Hopeful for a way forward. But as for what that way forward should look like, the answer might look different depending on who you ask.
You can't just say change, do this and do that. You have to be the change you want to see.
After the break, we'll hear from the Fort Wayne organization Bigger Than Us. Its founders talk with us about their mission of encouraging hope and togetherness within the Black community.
You're watching Faces of Change on Fort Wayne's NBC. Our special coverage continues now.
Welcome back. 6 friends bonded through a passion to connect, achieve, and succeed have made it their mission to fight for equality and opportunity for all.
Fort Wayne's NBC Today anchor Jack Keenan introduces us to Bigger Than Us, Inc. It's a networking nonprofit that believes the collective is bigger than the individual.
They say that they just want to be heard, you know, and with BTU we have a platform where your voice can actually be heard.
Bigger Than Us, a brotherhood that started on the Northrop High School football field, blossoming 3 years ago into a collective nonprofit.
You have to be that example. You know, you can't just say change, do this and do that. You have to be the change you want to see.
And practiced by donating school materials, hosting youth sporting events, and giving young entrepreneurs a head start toward success.
We had our BYOB, Bring Your Own Brand. So we use our platform for other brands to come out and network with other people around the city, because there's a lot of amazing people around this city that's doing amazing things. So we want everybody to get the recognition and, you know, to show love to the city.
A connective goal that's received additional spotlight since the protests earlier this summer.
With the George Floyd, it seems like everybody has gotten a sense of urgency to see change.
Now the focus is on building a better tomorrow, today.
If we want to beat this, we got to start making our community right first. Get up, get out there, do your research, never, go head first without knowing what you're talking about.
Fueled by a passion for truth and justice.
And have pride and have self-respect in yourself. Get educated, go out there and learn about some things. We bring a new perspective to, some people, our peers, because a lot of people don't think about starting a nonprofit. So yeah, I think it's broadening your horizon and getting like that.
And concluding with the coming together of mutual benefit and understanding.
As long as we keep ourselves informative and keep ourselves focused, we could definitely make that next step.
Just get out and just listen to one another, because your life is just bigger than yourself. It's bigger than us.
Jack Keenan, Fort Wayne's NBC.
The group plans to keep pushing for equality.
If anyone knows the value of mentorship and a helping hand, it's Fort Wayne officer James Payne. And maybe you've seen him out on the streets before wearing his badge and a smile.
Yeah, Fort Wayne's NBC reporter Louis Tran caught up with Officer Payne, who chose to put himself on the front lines when it comes to conversations about race.
Five days a week, he gets up for work to serve and protect. But who is the man behind the badge?
Unit 651 in line.
His name is Officer James Payne.
I love it, I love it.
Protesters. Early June, I captured this photo of him talking with protesters.
Positive protesting, totally understandable.
The photo and others shared hundreds of times on social media.
That just made me feel really good.
And there's a reason why he's getting so much love. You see, when he's not wearing this uniform, he's wearing this. He's a ref, an umpire, and mentor, helping the youth during his spare time.
I want these kids to know that they can do anything that they want to do. They can be anybody that they want to be.
A man with a big heart and a big smile. But that smile wasn't always there.
Wasn't too good.
At age 12, Payne says some white high school kids would chase him and his cousins.
We're not doing anything. We're walking home from school.
One day after school, 2 officers stepped in. But instead of helping, Payne says one officer told him to just go home. And the other,
he said, you need to be chased.
A terrifying moment that might have shaped his long-term outlook, if not for another man he met, Murray, Kentucky Police Chief Jeff Lyles.
Had this officer not came with a positive attitude, then my perspective of police probably would have been ruined.
Payne says Chief Lyles listened and took him under his wing, a turning point that inspired him to become an officer. Payne went to the University of Louisville, where he played football and studied criminal justice. Everything was right on track. But then, one Saturday night, He says he and his teammates went out and a fight broke out.
We were trying to initially break it up.
Moments later, Payne says another man walked up to him and held a gun to his face.
He pulled the trigger and it never fired.
A life-changing moment.
I was numb. It's like life stopped.
But it didn't break him.
That God spared me for a reason.
And that reason, Payne says,
you don't fight evil with evil. You fight evil with good.
Is to serve and help others.
So when I put this badge on, when I put this vest on, I let them know that that's what I stand for.
And now, he's willing to listen, just like the chief did with him back in his hometown.
I know how you feel. I know that you're angry. If you feel comfortable, come to me. Come to me and talk to me, and I'll do the best that I can to get your problem solved and get your message out.
Louis Tran, Fort Wayne's NBC News.
Listening and learning. That's what so many people have been focused on since the first nights of the conflicts.
And Linda, we're already starting to see some changes. Take a look.
Tonight, Fort Wayne City Council passed an ordinance that would make it mandatory for all police officers in the city to wear body cameras. Mayor Tom Henry is forming a special commission to try and push through what he calls positive changes on the city police force.
Yeah, Linda, Democrat Councilwoman Michelle Chambers will be the chairperson for the 15-member commission that will dig into the strengths and weaknesses of the city police force.
Some of our coverage of what's happened since the protests, but there's still anger.
When Faces of Change continues, a Fort Wayne mother on the tension, what she's teaching her daughter, and her thoughts on how we all move forward.
You're watching Faces of Change on Fort Wayne's NBC. Our special coverage continues now.
We're reaching the end of our coverage tonight, but we want to share one more story with you. Minnie Jackson. She's a black woman, a mother, and an LGBTQ activist.
She's been on the front lines of the protests, a leader in this movement. And Fort Wayne's NBC reporter Carly Van Cleve now shares her story.
For 401 years, we have dealt with segregation, slavery. You know, we've been oppressed for so long that we fight amongst each other just to get a piece of the pie.
33-year-old Minnie Jackson, a Fort Wayne native, says racism here is very real.
Every day that I wake up, I actually walk out my house and I look around.
She says she lives in fear because of her identity.
So I'll walk every day just in fear of whether or not I'm gonna have hatred either coming from people who don't like black people or hatred from people who don't like gay people.
But she says that's the reason she's fighting for change and for the future of her 5-year-old daughter, LaBella.
And she shocked me one night when I was putting her to bed. She said, I don't want to be a police officer no more. I said, oh, what you want to do? She said, I want to be like you, Mommy. Here, hold my hand.
Jackson protested nearly every day for a full month downtown. And she says once she felt comfortable with peace on the streets, her daughter was by her side.
And we say, who are you? And she'll tell us, I am intelligent.
I am intelligent.
I am important.
I am important.
And I am black.
And black.
So I love the fact that my daughter loves the skin that she's in. She loves everything about her. She loves everything black. We have to stop being portrayed as the enemy. And that's the world I'm striving for her to be in.
And that's the world she's protesting for.
Good job. The energy in there to where you can feel love and anger all at the same time.
She says it felt like for one moment, surrounded by the chanting, the marching, and the power of the people, she felt free.
The roots of America is embedded in hatred. And until we dig up those roots and start planting new ones and planting new seeds, we're gonna stay the same.
We're doing this for us.
The power is in the fist of it's right here. We got the power. It's just all about how we use it. So right now, as of today, I am proud to be a gay black woman.
The black people are the base to America.
Carly Van Cleve, Fort Wayne's NBC.
Jackson says over the course of the protests, she's learned what it means for a community to come together. And she says she will keep teaching her daughter what it takes to fight for change.
There are so many more stories and perspectives that we could share with you, but a half hour just isn't time enough. We do hope that we've been able to show you these groups of protesters, not just as faceless crowds, but as diverse individuals and as faces of change.
Thank you so much for joining us for this special broadcast. For more information on the people in the 7 stories we shared with you, or to watch any of the segments in their entirety, go to fortwaynesnbc.com. For all of us at Fort Wayne's NBC News, have a good night.